one of the things you said, and it's such an important point, like it is the reason, and one of the reasons, in my opinion, our economy is having problems. It is the reason small businesses have problems. One of the things you did that goes so against the grain, truthfully, as Americans, maybe that was the trick. You took a long range view instead of a short range view. And with the stock market working the way it is, everything is what was your last quarter, right?
Right.
With so many entrepreneurs, they're thinking about, I need my next client. They're not setting up their business for long-term planning. They're making decisions for their immediate situation.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Erin Marcus, former corporate executive turned entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business. Welcome to the Ready Yet podcast. We're excited to bring you more than 100 episodes of interviews and insights designed to help entrepreneurs get the financial and emotional freedom they need in order to build a business and a life they're proud of. Welcome to this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. And I'm very excited to introduce you to today's guest, Dr. Taryn Rose, because when I had the lucky fortune of hearing you speak at the Union League Club in Chicago, you talked about so many of my favorite things. You talked about overcoming fear. You talked about shoes, like really cool shoes. And you talked about going against the grain and doing all the things you basically weren't supposed to do to create the life that you now have. So I can't wait for you to share your story with everybody. So why don't you give everyone a little more formal introduction into who you are and what is that you do?
Okay, so going against the grain thing, well, I am the eldest daughter of very disappointed Asian parents.
Still.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
At least they talk to me now. They didn't talk to
there
me
you
for
go.
2 years,
Oh my
and
God.
I'll explain to the audience why. So, to go back to the original story is
Yeah.
that I'm a Vietnamese refugee. I went to Fort Smith, Arkansas when we first landed in this country, and we didn't know anyone. And my father was tasked with the job of finding someone who would sign and say, okay, we will be responsible for this family.
Right.
And so we were just so fortunate to have had the help of the Dr. Koenig and his family. But, my father was a physician, so he thought, well, I'll just cold call doctors from the Yellow Pages, because this was in 75. We didn't have Twitter.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
It goes under the category of, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It
Right,
doesn't mean it wasn't scary, but it really isn't
right.
more complicated than that.
Yeah, and it sort of goes back to what I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to deal with is that when you start to network, you start with what you know,
Yeah.
and then you start to expand from
From
that
there,
seed.
absolutely. I call those your natural credentials. Start
Yeah,
with your natural credentials. When I expanded my business to a wide range of entrepreneurs, my natural credentials were in real estate and financial services because of my background. So I
right.
started there because I had enough natural credentials that at least those people would give me 8 seconds instead of 2 seconds to convince them I was worth even listening to.
Yeah,
So I love
exactly.
that.
So I felt like that was a very entrepreneurial task that he did, because basically
Absolutely.
being an entrepreneur is asking people for resources, and usually they're strangers.
Right. Exactly.
So I had a wonderful childhood and grew up in the Midwest in Missouri, and then we moved to California after my father finished his residency in pathology. And from there, I went to USC School of Medicine and dutifully became a doctor. And I trained as a,
It's the
yeah,
path that was laid out
yeah,
before you.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Um, but I always remembered, I was playing, for my undergrad degree, I got a BS in biological science and a BA in philosophy. So I was sort of playing with, do I want to do something like go into law? I always had like this knack for business, to put myself through college. I worked for Estee Lauder, and so
Oh, nice.
I created a registry. So my clients would tell me what they wanted, and then I would tell them, send your husbands in for gifts.
Right. So
And
while the rest of us were working at like the bookstore, right?
yeah,
The cafeteria, you had
yeah,
the
I was
fun
earning
to be a little
commission.
more
Yeah.
creative, right?
So I went into medicine, and I really thought I was going into dermatology.
Mm,
And my idea was I'll start a cosmeceutical company because I worked at Estee Lauder and I knew about the cosmetics business. But then I fell in love with orthopedics. I just love the field. I love being able to get people back on their feet and mobilized. It's just a
yeah.
very happy field.
Well,
Um,
it's so interesting to hear you say that because I have absolutely zero medical training and a metric ton of medical history. And
oh,
I've often wondered, how do people get into the fields that they choose? And to hear you say it that way, like, why would someone want to work with feet? But it's so true. Like, if if you can't walk,
right.
you're talking about a life diminishing
Yeah,
situation.
your daily activities are just so limited. So, and orthopedics is not just feet; it's all musculoskeletal
Mhm.
um, surgeries. So, and I also liked it because it was a field where it was very much to the point. You have a broken bone, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
I didn't like to belabor too much on all of the possibilities.
Right.
That's for a different personality.
Very true,
Um,
right? The what was that show, House, where we were trying to figure out what was wrong with people. Yours was much more straightforward. Love it.
yeah, yeah. So I went into orthopedics, and when I started the field, I didn't think of a business per se, not like dermatology. But then as I was running around the hospital in heels still, I was still always very stylish. I remember sitting in the hospital ward at LA County, speed dialing Nordstrom's because they were having a sale, and I was looking for a
That's
particular pair of shoes.
fantastic.
Yeah, so it was back in I mean, this was 1992 to
Right.
97, so
We didn't have the internet where you could just
yeah,
order it and
exactly.
it shows up. Right. Yes, totally been
Um,
there.
so I started to do a research project actually on diabetic feet and
Mm,
diabetic shoes, because what people don't realize is that a, a lot of the complications that diabetic patients have with their ulcers and eventually sometimes amputations is because they don't want to wear the ugly therapeutic shoes. They think
right.
it looks horrible. And so I was very fortunate. I somehow connected with someone who got me connected with Nike, and we did a project together about redesigning diabetic shoes to make them look better. And so I learned about shoemaking. And that was sort of the start of the seed where I'm like, well, my shoes that I wear are always uncomfortable. I know about shoemaking now more than I did before. And then my patients are coming in saying, do I need surgery? My feet are killing me. And most of the time, they didn't need surgery. They just needed better shoes.
It's so true. I mean, I miss, and when we met, I so miss wearing all my heels. I mean, I lived in 4-inch heels. There's a story of me saving a giant snapping turtles from the side of the road in 4-inch candies at the time. I mean, but it's so true that the pain now prevents me from doing that.
Yeah.
And my mom and
Yeah.
I like to joke that the only place on our bodies with absolutely zero fat are the balls of our feet, right? Where it could use some extra fat,
I mean, that's the unfairness of life, right? Where we're
right?
not depositing fat as we
Where we
age,
want
where
it.
we need it, right? But it is a true phenomenon. You start to lose your fat pad as you age in your feet. So, I like to think that I help women think on their feet, not about their feet.
Nice. Got it.
Because I feel that we have enough to contend with. Let's remove one more obstacle
Right.
in a woman's life. And I also feel that if I help women in particular, because we wear heels and it's a much more challenging feat to overcome the physics of heels. But but at the same time, heels are important, particularly if you are shorter like me. I'm 5'2".
You've got 2 inches on me. So, but to your point, I worked in a male dominated,
Yeah,
very conservative field where with very few women in C-level positions. And
right.
I'm 5 feet tall. And I also looked like I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
So there is truth to wearing heels creates a structure in
Well,
your body that
there's
just
plenty of studies that show stature determines the person's sense of confidence, but
right.
also how they are perceived.
And it was less about, okay, because let's face it, even with the heels
Hmm.
on my fancy days, I was still only 5'3", 5'4". My
Hmm.
regular heels, I was only 5'2", but the just positioning of how I would stand and
Right,
how clothes looked on me
right, right.
changed everything.
So, I know there are women out there who says, I don't care, I'm gonna do only flats. And I say, you do what's comfortable for you, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there is a psychological rationale for heels that it's not about being frivolous. So, I feel that if you are comfortable physically, you are going to be able to shine spiritually. And then at the end of the day, that's what you want when you walk into a meeting or an event, right?
Well, and they say this about weddings and proms. You don't want to spend your big important time adjusting what you're wearing and being distracted by being
Right.
uncomfortable.
Exactly. Exactly. You want to be in the moment and enjoying yourself, not trying to figure out, okay, when can I take these shoes off?
Right. How do I do this? So
Yeah.
when did you let your parents in on this idea that you were going to, because it wasn't like you were bucking the system from day one. Like my mother knew I was crazy from the get-go, right? So she was disappointed, but not terribly shocked when I said, hey, I'm leaving my fancy job. But you had followed the,
Yeah, I toed the line partly because I went into medicine because I happened to be really good at biology. It just came very natural to me. And then I was like, well, this is the path of least resistance, so I'll go do that. But then when it came to when I finished and I was applying for jobs, it just seemed like a very dark future for me because I was thinking, wow, I'm going to go out and have a very nice job, a very nice life, but is it going to stimulate my creativity enough? And I heard a story about a male orthopedic surgeon who was always inventing things. And I heard that he's so sad now to be in a practice that is very good, but it's not fulfilling his need for innovation and invention. So I think there are some of us who have that, and we need to scratch that itch.
mm-hmm.
And I was definitely one of those. So when I finished, I said, well, you know what? I will have to do a fellowship anyway, since I wanted to specialize in hand surgery,
Okay.
ironically. But let me try to do this shoe company idea. And then if it's a failure after 2 years, then I'll just go back and do a fellowship. And, what have I lost? 2 years, right?
So
So,
I'm curious how that worked for you because I have mixed opinions on, and I remember thinking this when I first heard you say that in your presentation, because a lot of times when you have such an amazing safety net, because let's
mhm,
face it, you had a really good safety net. You would have been very employable, very,
yeah.
and then you give yourself this deadline. What's the impetus besides your drive to really make it work, burn the boats type of thing, no going back.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I eased into it, right? Because I always knew during the first 2 years, which are the scariest years,
Right.
because I didn't know if I would like running a business, if I would like the shoe industry. I had a way back.
Hmm.
Beyond that, yeah, it was tough. I mean, but I was so swept up in the success, fortunately, that I forgot to think about it. And luckily, everything worked out really well. And I'm very proud to say that I built that first company to 40 million in sales.
Nice.
And it was my first company, so I don't think I appreciated that
You
that
didn't know it
achievement.
wasn't supposed to work. There's so
Yeah.
much beauty in not knowing what's not supposed to work, right?
Right, right, right. So I'm very fortunate that everything worked out well, and I ended up selling 10 years later. I was very fortunate again, and I always say you can do everything right, but everybody needs a little bit of luck. Because I've talked to plenty of entrepreneurs who were trying to sell their companies right at the Great Recession,
Mhm.
and the deals fell through because everything shut down. And
I
I
Yeah,
got
I
my,
absolutely agree with that. I left my corporate job, which I had ownership shares
hmm
right before that Great Recession. So when I left, my ownership shares paid out very well.
yes,
When 6 months later, it was gone, right?
yes. So
Um, so that,
we were the lucky ones. And
yes.
I think the only skill I had was the fact that I, in 2007, I started sensing a slowdown. And I told my board, and this was very contentious, I said, I don't think we can maintain double digits growth. We need to look at decreasing costs. And they did not agree with me because in 2007, the reports were still, oh, luxury is never going to die. It's
That's a really
amazing.
good point, because
Yeah,
luxury for an interestingly short period of time, luxury was like a dirty word.
yeah. So, but what I could see and saw with my clients was that Mrs. Jones, who normally came to see me, and she would buy 5, 6 pairs of shoes, now was saying, "Well, I'll just buy two, and I'm happy." And even in my
Change.
personal life, I was like, "Well, how much more stuff do I need?" Like I was just it's like a
Mhm.
kid overdosing on ice cream, right?
Right.
You're so I just had a gut feeling, and I told the board what I did, and they didn't like it, and we weren't getting along so well because we had two different philosophies. So they bought me out, and the wire came in 2 weeks before the
Wow.
Great Recession started. It was
Oof.
incredible. Yeah, so it's the same as what you went through. If you had
Well, and
waited,
we were literally, I was still in the financial services world. We were at a big um event downtown Chicago at the Fairmont, in the room where the shareholders were having their annual meeting. And in the next room were all of our insurance representatives for the cocktail party celebration. They weren't allowed in the shareholders meeting.
right?
And it was literally that moment when everybody got the call. Goldman Sachs shut down. Like, the people we had worked with for years were getting calls saying, well, hopefully you have your plane ticket home, because that's it. It's over.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And one of the things you said, and it's such an important point, like, it is the reason, and one of the reasons, in my opinion, our economy is having problems. It is the reason small businesses have problems. One of the things you did that goes so against the grain, truthfully, as Americans, maybe that was the trick. You took a long range view instead of a short range view. And with the stock market working the way it is, everything is, what was your last quarter, right?
Right.
With so many entrepreneurs, they're thinking about, I need my next client. They're not setting up their business for long-term planning. They're making decisions for their immediate situation.
That's right.
Loving what you're learning here and interested in more? Check out our free Facebook group and join us at Conquer Your Business Community to find even more tips and tools designed to help you get out of reaction mode and into conquering your own business.
And what I learned from the first business, and how, as you know, I launched a second business now, also in the shoes world, is that it's not about the top line revenues. It's what's in the bottom line. So,
Oh my God, why do not people not understand that? I used to have these conversations with one of my mentors about, you see on social media that I made, $700,000 at my last event. Yeah, but it cost you $650.
That's right. That's right. The rule of thumb with the press is you use the largest number that you have.
Right. What did somebody say? Kelly Roach, Unstoppable Entrepreneurs. What did she say? Gross is for vanity and net is for sanity. That's what she
I
said
love
to me
that.
this
That's
morning.
great.
That's what she said to me. I was talking to her this morning. Gross is for vanity and net is for sanity.
Yeah, and to be honest, my first business was about vanity. I was going after that 40 million top line, and looking back, there was so much I could have done to decrease the costs. I was making like 6%, 5% EBITDA instead of now with far fewer revenues, I'm at 20%
Nice.
EBITDA.
Nice. Yeah.
Sometimes 25. So,
So
it's a different mindset, and maybe it's maturity because
it's business mind maturity. It's
yeah.
100% not age related maturity, a little bit age related maturity, but it's the
Well, yeah.
business maturity, right? But let's circle back to something, because some of my audience is going to hear what you're talking about and think, Dr. Taryn, she's up here. We're talking in numbers that they can't even wrap their mind around. But
Right.
you had the same challenge that so many entrepreneurs had, if not
Oh,
worse. Your parents stopped talking to you. Like, nobody understands.
right. But I'm like every other woman out there trying to start a business. We have so much lower support from the VC community, from the
Yeah.
banks. I mean, I remember I was at 16 million in sale, and I had a banker come in, and he looked around and says, "Who would pay $300 for a pair of shoes?"
He clearly doesn't have a wife, right?
Well, I
Clearly
said, "Go home and
doesn't.
ask your wife."
Right? You're
And
probably missing some conversation.
right. And then I'm thinking, he saw our financials. Like, obviously, somebody's
Right.
paying for the $16 million worth of shoes. So I just feel like it was such a weird conversation. So it was, I feel that it is something that women are at such a disadvantage as far as being able to get the proper capital to fulfill their full potential.
Right.
With that said, though, I do think that the scarcity makes us better. It makes us
Well,
stronger. It makes us scrappier
scrappier. And it
and
makes us,
much more flexible.
and I think you can't, I guess the frustrated side of me says, first we have to get, it's like this double bind, right? First we have to get out of our own way, because women tend to identify ourselves with our businesses at a much more intimate personal level than a man does with their businesses, which is why they don't get upset to the level that when things don't work, like, oh, I'll just try the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you have the external challenges, the
That's
truth of
right.
the external challenges.
Right, right. And it's just simply not fair. One of the reasons I sold, for example, after 10 years was I was exhausted because I didn't have a wife at home. I had given birth during the 10 years to three kids.
Oh my God.
And yeah, so it was just, I was completely burnt out. And I didn't see the signs of that. I was still young and naive, thinking I could just,
Pound it into
you know,
submission. This was
yeah,
my approach for a long time.
and by brute force
Yeah.
get through it. But not at all. I mean, I was burnt out. I was a workaholic, and I needed to change. And
So how
my
did you
job.
do that? What shifted for you?
Well, selling the first company was
Yeah,
like
it
an
was
alcoholic
helpful.
selling the bar, you know. So that helped because I realized that I could function and it was okay. And it wasn't overnight. Certainly, it took me a couple of years to realize that I didn't need to work just to have value.
Yeah.
So that was very good for me. And in this business, in Enrico Queenie, I'm much more thoughtful about how I spend my time. I make sure I get plenty of rest and learn to say no. You know, maybe we could double our business, but if it means being on the road 2/3 of the year, like I was at Taryn Rose, then I it's something that I choose not to do. I'd rather look at, okay, what are ways where we can provide adequate rest and time to recover for everyone. And I think it's better as a leader for the team.
Absolutely. And to your point, your bottom line is better.
Right.
So
Right.
if you want to just use that as a measurement of success, you're
Yeah, I was
more
using
successful on your own
right.
terms than you were when you were.
Exactly. Yeah. I was using the wrong metric because I bought into the press of, looking at the big
Headlines
number.
of $40 million.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so I'm very proud that I've sort of crossed that river, right? And I can look at it and say, okay, this is the better way to function. So I would say for I'm not saying that don't go after the top line. I think that's still important, but you can't do it at the sacrifice of your sanity. Don't let your vanity
Right? Don't, right? Wasn't
destroy
that a
your
great way to
sanity,
put
which is, probably what happened with my first company at Taryn Rose.
it?
With
And I
Enrico
think,
Queenie, in a way, it helps with our current company because everything is so much more customized and personalized in the way we do our shoes. Everything is made to measure. We also have a new technology that is far superior than anything else on the market to make sure women are comfortable, particularly in heels, that it forces us to not always think of mass production.
but
And
you
and
only
it
know those things when you've chosen them ahead of time. I call them my litmus tests. I
mhm,
have a series of things I have pre-decided that this is what's important to me. This is the type of business I want. This is the type of life I want. And it keeps me out of reaction mode because
right,
every decision I make has to line up with just a couple of things I've decided ahead of time. So you've decided ahead of time that you're going for, high performance, high experiential, right?
right, right. Um, and when you go down that path, there is more room to say, well, it's not about how many units we can crank out. It's about how great each pair can be and our relationship with the client. So it's slower growing as far as the top line, but as you said, it's much better for the bottom line and much better for our life, our sanity. And also, I'm very fortunate because I started Taryn Rose, my first company, in the era without Facebook, without social media. E-commerce was so-so. to now I'm running a primarily e-commerce company. We don't have any retail locations, thank goodness, because the pandemic would have killed
Right.
us, right?
Right.
So again, it was lucky in the sense that we had built a business model that survived the pandemic, in fact, grew during the pandemic because we did not have any retail overhead, and we did not have any inventory because we did not
Because you
wholesale the
customize everything.
shoes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just the, again, the business lessons that I'm always interested in hearing is this intersection where your intention, right? You didn't get so into your intention that you ignored reality.
Right. Right.
And so many, and I hate to say it, but I see this with women more than I see with men. They do their business in a bubble. They create what they want to sell in a bubble without talking to the market because they're scared they're going to get information they don't like.
That's true. That's true. Especially, I think it's because when you women tend to do more consumer goods.
Mhm.
And so they think, well, if I love this, this must be
It's gotta be
fantastic.
good.
Everybody's going to love this. And I'm like, I have no use for that box that you just
So,
created.
so I'd love for you to share, because I one of the things about the way you're talking about this that I really, you can tell the maturity in the business level is it's very without judgment, right? You're not down on yourself for the bad things. You're also not, you're very aware without judgment of what worked, what didn't work. So I love sharing, it's terrible, but I love sharing the dirty underbelly of it all. Like, what have you tried? Because I think it's important. It's important to share successes to
Mhm.
pull people forward, but it's also important to share things that didn't work because you want people to know they're not alone in the challenges. So aside from, well, let's say, aside from like running yourself into the ground and your parents not talking to you, or I don't know if we have to even go any further than that. Like, what were some
Well,
of the things that you
I
tried
mean,
that you'd
do
warn
we have
people off?
do we have 2 days? But I'll uh, I'll talk about for sure this one, which is very important because I don't want to say that I'm like the genius who created this really brilliant business model now, right? It happened organically
Mm.
because when I was launching the Enrico Queenie line, I reverted back to what I knew, which was a wholesale branded model. So I met with the president of Saks and Neiman's, all my contacts, and they were all like, "We love you, but sneakers are in right now. We're expanding sneakers. We have more heels than we can possibly sell, and we're over inventoried on that. So it's just not a good time." So I even with all of my industry contacts, all the doors closed. So then I was like, well, now what do I do? And I, to be honest, I was not into direct to consumer at first because it was foreign to me. It was uncomfortable because it's not what I knew, right?
Right.
So, but once I was able to make the shift and I was able to see, oh, wow, by giving our all to the end users, they could feel much more the care and love that we put into the product and the experience. Because when you're a wholesaler, your customer is really the buyers,
Right.
right? So
The
the
big story.
consumers, yeah, the end users never really got that love or as much of the love as they should. And now our model is so different, but it wasn't because I started out intending it to be that way.
But you were aware enough to listen to it. And you also didn't just stop.
Right,
You
right,
could have very easily done a couple things. You could have been like, oh, well, I guess it's not time. Or you could have been like, oh, well, I guess we're designing sneakers now.
right.
There, but you didn't stop just because a bunch of people that you respected and knew
And
said no.
they had the power of the checkbook, and
And they
we
all
weren't going to
said
get that.
no.
Yeah. So,
And you said, oh, yeah, watch this.
yeah, I was more of, okay, let's figure out then how do we sell these shoes? Because I do feel like the technology is so far superior. And only after we started down this path, I saw that actually all of those buyers did me a favor because I
Right,
learned
right.
so much more
The
about
gratefulness and what didn't feel good in the
yeah,
moment. The universe is working for you. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's, what is that? There's a saying about rejection. Rejection is God's protection.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah, yeah. So I
That's
always try to
fantastic.
think, okay, when I'm being rejected, what can I learn from this?
Hmm.
And we basically, because working with the end consumers being direct, our profitability was so much better that we could grow organically. And we went from begging factories to make shoes from us to now owning two factories because we just kept putting it back into our infrastructure. And the way I look at it is that instead of putting capital behind inventory that maybe no one needs, we put it
Which is
into
so
the
wasteful,
infrastructure.
right? It's
Yeah,
so, I mean, that's how our country works. And
right.
logistics of all the stuff is so expensive and
That's right. And it's
a
such
nightmare.
a waste for the planet. And it's simply not necessary. Now, it does require, I mean, our clients are very patient. They
Mhm.
usually wait about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks to get their shoes. So there is a give and take. But, our clients feel like it's well worth it to wait for something that feels really good, that's personalized for them. And also, as you said, there's not as much waste. So it's a shift as far as the financial part goes, is that we shifted from spending capital on inventory that could easily go stale because inventory will kill a business
Absolutely.
immediately. And it's hard to predict what people are going to like. And then on top of that, with shoes, you have a fit problem. Like it's so bad that we invested instead in owning our manufacturing vertically so that we could make shoes one by one because most factories would not
Yes.
accept that. They don't want to deal with that.
They're not set up for it. It doesn't work in
No,
their model.
no, no. So, and by working with the end users, the final customers, we saw that there was such a need for the kind of customization, personalization that we do because people have a variety of feet. And when the manufacturers are sort of saying, okay, we have this set of measurements and proportions. If you don't fit into it, too bad. You got to keep looking, or you just have to put up with it, which is what happens to most women.
Most of us.
And when you're wearing a heel, there's a lot more precision that needs to be had in the shoes that is just not possible, and that's why so many women complain.
And they're
So
right, and they don't get what they need and they don't get what they
yeah,
want.
they're not getting value for their money. They're not getting value.
So I could talk to you for like 6 more hours easily. But I want to give, people need to see what it is that you're offering. So what is the easiest way for them to, tell everybody what's the easy way to get a hold of you or to view your website and spell it out for them? Because I know I've spelled it wrong on more than one occasion.
Okay, yes. So it's named after my partner Enrico Queenies, and it's spelled ENRICOCUINI.com. And on there's a contact form, so if you need to get a hold of me, I'm there. And there's great, interesting videos of how we work. It's very unique because you can either go to a live event or book a virtual fitting. And we're working on new innovations to create measurement apps and things like that.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm very excited. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with me, for sharing your time with me. Hi, I've been on the website. I have my eye on a few things. So I highly recommend. I was looking for another pop-up store. I highly recommend checking that out. And again, thank you so, so much. I'm excited for everything you've done. I love putting yourself out there as an example of what's possible. And especially as a woman in manufacturing, I mean, I could go on and on and on. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
All I